Good day, Mom. I am Danica Amolat from Bshm 2A, and for today's reporting is I'm going to report about the Chapter 9 in Organizational Management, which is the organization of personnel. So we have here the first slide. Organization of personnel. The most complicated problem of business is people. Technical process may be mastered, requirements of materials may be corrected, figure plans and offices may be built according to required specification and intricate machines and may be devised to perform with accuracy. But if the human elements in business are disregarded, trouble is ahead. Human beings essentially differ from each other. They cannot be standardized, make and imitate things. They are dynamic, not static. The most certain thing about people is they are identity. Uncertainty is lack of sureness about doubt, dubiety, suspicion, mistrust, means of lack of sureness about someone or something. Moving on to the next slide, we have here the basic personal problem. The basic problem about personal is that the employer has work to be done. The employee wants to receive for his work enough and money to live according to the standard of living as established for himself. When the employer has to pay too much to get the work done, decreased cost will be reflected in the higher price of the finished product to the point of diminishing orders from customers. On the other hand, if the employee cannot get the money that he thinks he's worth, he will leave the job or look for another job or somewhere else. Moving on to the next slide, we have here increasing the efficiency of the workers. The desire of the employer to bring down his cost of production and the desire of the employee to have adequate returns from his efforts are two economic objectives acting opposite each other and which must have to be reconciled. Both objectives may be attained by increasing the efficiency of the workers. This simply means making it possible for an employee to accomplish more work with less effort and less time. Efficiency is usually enhanced by the proved personal methods which can increase the workers' output two or three times, lower the production cost, and increase wages simultaneously. And training is the example of an important factor which is responsible for the increased efficiency of the worker. Moving on to the next slide, we have here the analysis of the job. The term job analysis has long had two recognized meaning, which is with corresponding objectives. The first is that analysis of the job applies to more or less superficial study of each other or work satisfactorily. The resulting information is summarized in a job specification which is used in selecting applicants for employment. The objectives is to make it possible for the interviewer to match more intelligent the applicant's qualification with the requirements of the job. The second is that job analysis means the improvements of the methods of doing the work. This is more of dissecting the work rather than describing it. And in this kind of analysis, the first step is to determine whether the work is really necessary. If the work can be eliminated, therefore no more time is needed to spend on it. Elimination of unnecessary work is considered the first technical step in any improvement program. If the work is found to be necessary, the next step is to examine everything connected with job, starting with purpose of the work. Moving on to the next slide, we have here time study. Time study is the purpose of this time study is as distinguished from motion analysis and is to determine the time required to perform each element in the operation, each operation in the job and the job itself. There are two reasons for time study. The first is provide a basis for the comparing performance of the same job and to establish a standard time for doing the work. And an important consideration in this regard are the variations as to time and as to causes. One thing to remember is that any variation from the standard operation must be eliminated or minimized provided of occurs and that condition are standardized. And the second is to make possible the payment of workers on a production basis or on the basis of output. For instance, um, if a worker is paid 1 peso, an hour per stated output per hour with a bonus for each addition accomplished per hour, he is being paid for what he actually does, not simply for stated amount of time to put in. And this condition provides a strong incentive of effective works. Moving on to the next slide, we have here the selection and testing of applicants. The selection of the persons best fitted to do the work involves finding the sources of desirable applicants and followed by interviewing, testing, and choosing from those available the ones who most nearly have the required qualifications. Moving on to the next slide, we have here the sources of applicants. The science and art of employment and recruiting is not as highly developed in the Philippines as in industrialized countries. The fact that most 10% of the labor forces is unemployed or seriously underemployed result in an abundance or oversupply of laborers, clerks, and certain types of personnel like lawyer. And there is also a serious shortage of management personnel, supervisors, and various types of skilled workmen. Moving on to the next slide, we have here the sources of labor supply are up to be fluid and variable. The following may be, however, be mentioned. It is 1 to 8. So let's discuss it one by one. So first, in the event of new openings, promotion, or other vacancies, the company should always look at its present employees and find out if any would be promoted and deserving of a promotion to the vacant item. And second, former employees with satisfactory record are valuable sources occasionally. Third, friends or relatives of present employees are good sources. Fourth, newspaper advertisements are always effective sources in the Philippines. And fifth, schools, colleges, and training agencies are sources for specific types of help, especially for younger and experienced applicants who have promotional possibilities. And sixth, the Department of Labor has an Office of Manpower Services which acts as the state employment agency in the Philippines, and private employee agencies are good sources also. And seventh, many skilled workers and supervisors send letters of applicants on their own volition to business firms. And lastly, in companies with labor unions, union files may present another source. So moving on to the next slide, we have here the selection procedure. This involves a sequence of functions adapted in a given case for the purpose of ascertaining whether or not candidates possess the qualification called for by a specific job. And in some cases, that the qualification of progression of jobs are considered when promotional possibilities are of importance, and this hiring procedure cannot be effectively placed in an operation until three major steps have been taken. So first, we have here the requirements of the job to be filled have been specified. And second, qualification workers must possess have been specified. And lastly, which is the third one, candidates for screening have been recruited. Moving on to the next slide, we have here selection. The selection of promising candidates from group of applicants is not easy. Certain facts or features such as sex, age, schooling, and previous employment are readily ascertained and checked. On the other hand, The intangibles are he wants that make the choice difficult. Suppose an applicant has worked for a certain time in a certain company. And those question is what did he do? How well did he do the work? And did he get along with the other employee in a good way? Moving on to the next slide, we have here testing ability and aptitude. In addition to the factors considered in judging the applicants, it is desirable to find two other things. So first, whether the applicant has any disease or tendency to disease which might spread among the other employees or which might interfere with his work sooner or later, and this is done through a medical examination. And second, the applicant's present level of knowledge, ability, and intelligence with respect to the work contemplated, and this is done through test. Moving on to the next slide, we have here personnel administration. And personnel administration has come up with tests which look into the second requirement, and these tests are intelligence test, aptitude test, vocational interest test, proficiency test, and personality test. So let's give its definition one by one. So first we have the intelligence test, and these are useful but have a tendency to be overrated. And second, aptitude testing is important where no occupational ability as expected at the outset, and such ability will be acquired through training and experience on the job. And third, a vocational interest inventory is a test used to help people identify their interests and the field that match them. Fourth, proficiency testing, on the other hand, is to determine whether or not the applicant possesses the specific capacity, ability, and skills required in the job for which he is being considered. And fifth, personality tests are designed to systematically elicit information about personal motivation, preference, interest, and style of interacting with people and situations. Moving on to the next slide, we have here induction and training. Induction is the procedure set for introducing new employees and orienting him in the company as a whole. Its importance cannot be overemphasized. The happiness of the new employee and the effectiveness of his work depends upon the trueness with which induction is carried. For instance, in the new employees getting a good start, a simple way of induction is showing the employee where work and making him acquainted with nearby employee. So moving on to the next slide, we have here the purpose of induction. One of the purposes of induction is to give the new employees information about the company and the requirements of the facilities provided for the employees. Such information includes working hours, rate, paydays, absence and tardiness, vacations, and others. Moving on to the next slide, we have here training procedure. Training procedure in the conduct of training, it is not first enough to tell the new employee to do his work frequently. He has to be shown. The demonstration should be handled clearly so that the worker can easily understand and follow each step. If written mandated practice instruction are available, the employee should be furnished copies so that he could study before attempting to work. And such simple instruction should be clear and understandable. Moving on to the next slide, we have here the different stages in training. Different steps in training include 1 to 7. So first, be sure that the new employee understand what you have instructed. And second, show him carefully what you want to be done using patience. And third, have him watch someone perform the work and let him ask questions. And fourth, review the instruction. Fifth, let him practice the work under direct supervision. Sixth, review the instruction again. And seven, let him more practice gaining proficiency constantly until his output approaches the standard set for the work. So we have here a follow-up question. So what is training? Training may be on the job, and this kind of training is essential that the job of the supervisor, and in some cases another experienced worker may conduct the training, although this has the disadvantage of keeping him from devoting full time to his job. A special instructor may also do the training, and training may be an apprenticeship. Formal and established procedure would include occasional lectures and classroom training also. Moving on to the next slide, we have here internship training. This refers to a joint program of training in which schools and business cooperate. Selected students carry on regular school studies for period ranging from 3 to 9 months and then work in some factory or office for a designated period of time, alternating in this fashion until the course is completed and the student is ready to accept permanent employment. The training is usually conducted in connection with highly skilled or professional types of training. Moving on to the next slide, we have here learning training. During period of heavy demand for ensured supplies of skilled labor, industry in face with the task of training green hands or learners, and the learners usually receive a program of education and training. Moving on to the next slide, we have here wage administration. Wage administration is an integral part of work of a personal administration. Wage structure have to be set up. An employee must be paid according to their performance. Desirable employees must have attracted to enter the company and once inside must be encouraged to remain. From the point of view of the company, it is must also avoid excessive wage payments, and it needs wage structures as a sound basis for budget and to simplify the collective bargaining process. Wage payments may be on a time basis, and those wages must be paid according to the number of hours or days work. A salary may be paid on a monthly basis, and payment may also be on an output basis, and piece works is an example, and an employee is paid according to the number of units he or his group completes, or a fixed time may be set for a fixed unit of output. And the basic responsibility of the wage administration rests with top management, but the personal manager participates in the determination of wage policies. He conducts wage surveys, he seeks the help of the time and motion staff of the management analysis. Moving on to the next slide, we have here a satisfactory wage should conform of certain characteristic. So first, it should be such as the maintain the standard of living to which the employee is accustomed, or it should be the same wage paid in the community for more or less that the same kind of work. And second, it should be within the capacity of the company to pay, and it should not cause the company to go into bankruptcy, but either should be company use bad management as an excuse to pay substandard wages. And third, it must be comparable to prevailing wage rates in the community. And fourth, wage should be related to output. And fifth, wage plans should be readily understood by employees, and if there is an incentive plan, it should be paid frequently that the employee can see the result of his increased effort. And six, the wage system should facilitate the collection of cost data. Moving on to the next slide, we have here incentive wages. Incentive wages can make many forms. The most common, the payment of the higher rates for a quantitative or qualitative standard of employee performance which is above the normal, and the foregoing example illustrate this form. Sometimes incentive wages are paid for time that is saved with corresponding decrease in extra pay as continues to improve. And sometimes there is a sharp break in the rate of pay between average workers and those who produce above standard. And special rates may also be given to supervisors, and foreman incentive wages may be given to individual workers. Moving on to the next slide, we also have here other incentives. So first, extra payments for time work, and these include extra pay for work performed during holidays, overtime pay, and cost of living allowances. And second, payments for time not work, and these include sick leave, military leave, maternity leave, test and break periods, vacation leave, and commutable transportation and representation allowance. And here, the employee gets paid even during certain period when he is not working. And third is employee security. The company either pays or contributes for social security, workmen's compensation, retirement plans, insurance pension, credit units, health and welfare funds, and similar projects for employee security. And fourth, non-production awards and bonuses. This includes the Christmas bonus, anniversary bonus, safety bonus, birthday award, etc. And the fifth one is employee services. These cover a wide field and include key provision by the employer for the employees of the cafeteria, beauty parlor, and etc. And six, cooperation between labor and management. The approach used towards this and in through the organization of labor management cooperation committees for the entire plant, and the duties of which are chiefly the formulation of general policies, coordination, and supervision. And this is further extended into subcommittees which deals with specialized activities such as safety training. So that ends with my report, Mom. Thank you so much and God bless you always.